Welcome to the Rewild Your Business podcast. I'm your host, Jill Mokes, and thank you so much for joining me again this week. Unless, of course, you're new here, in which case you're so welcome, and you've probably found me at a really good time, actually, because we're just in the early stages of our mini-series, podcast within a podcast, if you like, called The Natural Order of Things. So if you haven't yet listened to episodes 210 and 211, then I would highly recommend, if you're new to these parts, that you head back and listen to those too, because this is a one builds on the next one, little mini series. So there's going to be 8 episodes altogether. Like I say, the first one is 210. So 210 through to 218, it's a little framework that I'm sharing with you that you can use on your business to identify where you need to put your attention if things have stalled. If your business isn't growing the way you want it to, then this is a framework for you to go through episode by episode, and you're going to learn what to do when you come to your first roadblock. I talked about this in episode 210, actually, that growth isn't linear. It's always sequential. So if you've got something that is not working, but you're busy fixing something else, if you think it's a marketing problem when really it's a brand problem, or if you think it's a sales problem when really it's the offer that's wrong, no amount of fixing the wrong thing is going to work. So this is a framework where you can just really logically work through each layer and diagnose for yourself where the problem is, and therefore where you need to be placing your focus and your energy. So this is our second deep dive. So episode 211 was all about inner truth. So that was your inner knowing, your intuition. It was all around your mindset, the vision you have, how clear your vision is for the business. It was the really truly foundational stuff. I always say that mindset and vision are the real infrastructure of your business. Like I say, if you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to that. Now, if you went through that episode and you felt like, do you know what, Jill? That's solid. I'm really there. I have a very clear vision for what I want my business to be. And my mindset's in good shape. I'm not holding myself back. I don't have a ton of limiting beliefs. I know what I'm capable of doing. But something's still not working. My business, the revenue in my business still isn't reflecting the reputation I have or the level of the transformation I offer to my clients. If you're feeling like that, then it's time to move on to this next layer. So this next layer I'm calling Truest Expression. So this is really your brand. But it's not brand in the way that so many people think of brand. So I am not interested really at all in the aesthetic of your brand. So this isn't about your logo or your color palette. Those things matter, yes, but they should be a natural consequence of getting your brand foundations right. So the aesthetic of your brand should represent the authentic core of your brand. And it's that authentic core of your brand that we're looking at today. Not the aesthetics, not the logo, not the color palette. Okay. I just always feel when I talk about brand, I need to make that differentiator because so many people think of design when they think of brand. And that is just one part of it. And like I say, it should be a naturally occurring part of the core of the brand. Okay, so your brand, what do we need to be looking for? What do we need to get clear on? And how do we do that? Okay, so let's dive into the episode. Welcome to Rewild Your Business, the podcast for women doing the work their soul intended. I'm Jill Mokes. I'm an international business coach, and I'm a guide for women doing the work that matters. Rewilding your business means cutting away what doesn't belong to allow what does to thrive, finding simplicity in your work. And it's about bringing the whole of who you are to the table, whether you're building something new or finding your way back to what really matters to you. I'm so glad you're here. I want to share a story with you about the evolution of my brand. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. For a long time, I showed up in my business as an edited version of myself. It's not like I was lying, or, to be honest with you, I wasn't trying to perform something, but I definitely made sure that I was positioning myself really carefully as the strategic one, the very structured one, the person who talks all the time about systems and frameworks and business architecture, all of the things that for me felt very credible, professional, very safe. And the whole of the rest of me, I didn't allow into my brand. I didn't let it inform my brand. No one would have known the part of me that is pretty deep thinking, quite spiritual now. That for a long time I wasn't. But yeah, now I would say that my spiritual practice is a huge part of my life. And it's something that now I talk about very freely and openly as part of my business. But for a long time, it wasn't. I didn't feel like I could belong to that club. And therefore, I just didn't allow any of that part into my business. I now talk about our soul's calling. I talk about my intuition. And I share much more about who I am as a woman who's gone through brutal menopause, as a woman who has changed over the years. I was talking to someone the other day about how, your confidence gets knocked by the menopause. And one of the places it affected me was my driving. How weird is that? I used to be like such a confident driver. And now I hate driving at night and I don't feel confident around it. And I think that's quite an interesting metaphor for what happens with menopause. We are different after the menopause to the woman we were before. And so we have to find these new ways of showing up that are still authentically true for us. And your brand's the same. Your brand is an evolution because it evolves with who you are. It has to stay true to who you are in that season of your life. And so I want to share with you what happened when I really made quite a conscious decision to look at my brand much more closely and allow really the whole of who I am to the table. Because I was scared to do that. I was really scared that the more strategic, kind of masculine energy version of me was really what people wanted. They wanted that kind of authority, business savvy, do action version of me. And I was worried that the more kind of spiritually alive version might cost me some of that credibility. It might cost me clients, it might cost me income, all of those worrying thoughts come up whenever we think about evolving and changing. And there was a part of me that felt like bringing the whole of who I am to my business was a risk I couldn't really afford to take. I did it anyway, because for me, the cost of inauthenticity is much more expensive. I can't do that. And what I realized afterwards, now I'm the other side of that, is actually, and I just know this to be true, I really want you to absorb this, the opposite is true. The completely whole, radically authentic version of me is actually much more compelling, more magnetic, more genuinely supportive of my clients than any compromise version could have been. So even the parts of me that feel like they're a bit much, that feel like they're different to how I was and therefore they might surprise people, all of those feelings that change bring up for us, the insecurities that change brings up, they all belong. Because your brand, your real brand, it really is the truest expression of who you are. And that is what will be the most powerful brand. It will be the most compelling. It's the brand that will attract the right people into your world, right? So if your brand is the truest expression of who you are, then I want to just expand on that a little bit and tell you what I believe your brand is and the questions it needs to be able to answer. There's 5 questions that your brand, the definition of your brand, has to be able to answer. The first one is, who am I? So this is around your identity. How clear are you on who you are, your identity, the whole of you, not that curated, intentional, strategic version. Who are you at your core? The second question is, what matters to you? So this is about your values. What are the non-negotiables in your life? What are the things that you will simply not compromise on, regardless of what's a la mode, whatever's trending, what seems strategically sensible, right? What are the things that you won't compromise on, regardless of any of that? The third question, why do I exist? And that sounds like a really big question to answer. But what I mean by that is, what is your mission? Why are you building a business? Why will that business exist? What is the reason behind it in the world? Beyond making money, right? That goes without saying. A business isn't a business unless it makes money. It's a hobby if it doesn't make money. So making money is a reason, a why that goes without saying. But why this business? Why does this exist? The fourth question, who do I serve? And I don't really mean here just the demographic, like women over 40 or whatever. It's not really that. I want to understand, what kind of psychographic do the people that you are here to serve have? What do they believe in? What matters to them? What are their specific problems, challenges, longings? What is the specific moment they're living through when they become an ideal client for you? And the last question that your brand has to actually answer is, why does this matter? And that's your purpose. That's the deeper why under all of it. I know I've put that last, and Simon Sinek would be saying, start with why. Just as important. All 5 of those questions are as important as each other. Your brand has to be able to very clearly answer and articulate the answers to all of those things. Your brand is really born out of kind of 3 things, really. It's born out of what matters most to you. So that's that values piece. It's born out of your story. So what is every bit of lived and learned experience that's brought you to where you are today? And it's born out of the message that you want to share. Those 3 things woven together are what make your brand completely irreplaceable. No one else has the exact same story as you. No one else has arrived at your message, the message you want to share, via the exact same path that you took to get here. No one else is you. And that is always your competitive advantage. That is, when people talk about a brand of one or a category of one, that's what we're really saying. We're saying that if you are authentic and if you are brave enough to allow your brand to completely reflect the truest expression of who you are, that can only ever give you a competitive advantage. And the mistake that I see happening time and time again, the most often, and it isn't the logo instead of identity piece, although that is very common, but it's actually something a bit more subtle than that. I see women all the time trying to build their brand from what seems strategically sensible rather than from what's true. If you think back to what I opened with and told you, that's what I did in the beginning. And what happens, the way this happens, is that we look at the market and identify what seems to be working for other people. And then we try and build our brand in that image. So we might study the other women who appear to be succeeding, and then unconsciously or sometimes consciously, we're shaping ourselves to fit a mold that we believe will be more palatable, more marketable, and more likely to be chosen. And that might work for a little while. You might attract the old client. You might start getting a little bit of movement, but then you are going to start to feel like you are wading through, I was going to say wading through mud. It's actually more like wading through concrete every single day, because a misaligned brand feels so difficult. Everything feels forced. Every bit of content that you're producing feels like such hard work. It doesn't feel like you're being creative and creating work and content and having a voice that you love and that you're sharing your truth. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like consistency is almost impossible for you. And it's not because you're lazy. It's because there's just no natural current running through it. There's no flow to it when you are forcing yourself into a brand that you've curated rather than a brand that represents the truest expression of who you are. So what ends up happening is that every single day you feel like you're starting over again. Everything is being built from scratch every day because there's so much intention and curation having to go into it, instead of just building on what's real. So when you're seeing other people who seem to be making this look effortless, whose content really feels alive, it's always so cohesive and their message is just always landing, the people who seem to be attracting all of the right clients, they don't seem to be struggling, and you're wondering why that isn't happening for you, it's because what they have is alignment. They are saying what they actually think in the way they actually say it, to the people they actually care about. They've stopped trying to be the strategically sensible version of themselves, and they've just started being the truest version. And there's something really important here, actually, thinking about it, because I think that some people feel like alignment or authenticity are personality traits, like something you either are or aren't, or have or don't have. But I don't think that's true. I think it's a choice. It's a choice you have to make every day. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes it's exhilarating. But sometimes it is uncomfortable. It's a choice to show up as the whole of yourself rather than just giving people those edited highlights, right? Another thing I want to just spend a moment on is your story, because I think this is a really underused element of your personal brand. And it's actually an incredibly powerful part. So I don't really mean like your story as in your entire biography, right? I'm not talking about some kind of about page that shows a chronological account, or LinkedIn bio that shows, I went to university here and then I did this and then I did that. That's not what I mean. What is the thread of meaning that runs through your lived and learned experience? What are the moments that really cracked you open? What are the things you had to unlearn, that you got wrong, that you had the habits you had to put down and release? Where did you get lost? And then how did you find your way back? And really importantly, what was the version of yourself that you had to leave behind to become who you are now? All of that is not separate from your brand. That is your brand. That is the part of your story that allows the right people to kind of read your words or listen to what you're saying and really feel it in their body. Really feel, yeah, she gets it. She understands. She knows what this feels like. And the parts of your story that feel vulnerable, the parts that you're most tempted to maybe keep private or to really polish a bit before sharing, maybe you want to frame them so carefully so that you come across well. Those are often the parts that actually create the deepest connection. And I am not talking about using vulnerability as a marketing strategy. This is a really different thing. So there's a difference. I've talked about this a lot before. So if you're a long-time listener, you'll have heard me say this. I'm not talking about sharing the scabs. I'm talking about sharing the scars. So there's a really big difference. If you are still reacting to a challenge, if you're still clawing your way out of something that was difficult for you, that is not the most alive part of your brand, right? The most alive part of your brand is the experiences that you've learned from, so that there is something in that for someone else. And that kind of sharing, that kind of vulnerability, sharing those scars, sharing the things that you've overcome, that is really bloody magnetic, especially today where everything is so performative. So I want you to think about your story and how you share it, because your story is going to be how the women that need you, or the people that need you, is how they're going to find you. Your story is incredibly important. The next thing I just want to talk about is your values, your story, and your message. Those three things. How are they showing up? And this is really what the audit part of what we're talking about here, because honestly, it's one thing to be able to articulate your values. You know, we can all pick 3 beautiful words off a list and decide that those are our core values. We can all do that, right? But it is a completely different thing for those words to actually mean something, for those words to actually represent how you show up in your business, visibly, consistently, across everything you do. So that it's not just about, do I know what my values are? Do I know what my story is? Do I know what my message is? It's about, am I actually building my business and making sure that those things are visible across everything I do? Because next week, we're going to talk about your offers. And honestly, your offers should be born out of your brand. Remember, I said that one part of your brand is who are you here to serve? Until you're so beyond clear on that, how can you possibly create the right offers? And the values piece and the story and the message, that informs who you're here to serve. Because I will guarantee you one thing, your ideal clients will have values of their own that are in alignment with yours. Not necessarily identical, but they're going to align with yours. The things that matter to you will matter to them. So how are those things showing up in the things you say, in your content, the conversations you have, your website, the opinions that you are willing to voice? How are they showing up? Are the people coming to you the people who you're actually here for? Or are you attracting the wrong people? Are you attracting maybe people who fit that strategic, curated version of your brand rather than the true one? So this is what the brand audit is all about. And it really is going to demand of you a lot of honesty here. Because if there's a gap between who you actually are and who you're presenting yourself to be, it's that gap where your energy leaks out. It's that gap where anything magnetic and compelling about your brand seeps away. So closing that gap is an incredible thing to do for your business. Your results will begin to change when you do this. I promise you that. When this layer is working right, when you've got a solid brand, something really shifts in how your business feels. Like creating content, for example, that stops feeling like such a chore and it starts becoming much more natural, more organic. It is just you telling the truth about the things you have to say, real things, true things. And saying them starts feeling like a relief instead of like, oh God, I've got to think about what my content plan is for this month. It's much more about, what do I need to share this month? What is true for me at the moment in this season of my life, in this season of my business? What's really true? What am I noticing that's pissing me off? Suddenly the truth is your content. You're less curated, you're less performing strategy, and you're more allowing your strategy to just be organic, right? And it works. I promise you. The right clients will start finding you. And it's not necessarily more clients with the brand piece. It's about the right clients finding you. Now, when we come on to marketing, which is layer 5, even though that's where a lot of people will start putting their energy before they've done any of this other work, marketing is where we can look at getting more clients. But can you see how if upstream this work on your brand hasn't been done, then marketing is just going to amplify that. You just get more of the wrong clients. We've got to make sure that you're attracting the right people to your brand before we turn any dials around getting more of them. We want those people who just get it, who really feel like they know you already before they even book a call with you. So when you get on a call with a potential client, they're already so aligned because they know exactly who you are and what you believe in and what your brand is. They're already halfway there to making the decision to work with you. And I think probably the most important thing of this is that you stop feeling like a fraud. And I know this is going to land for so many people, even if we don't want to admit it. I think that especially in this day and age where there's so much fakeness around, there's so much noise, it's really easy to get sucked into trying to join that game. And then you feel all icky, feel like you're not doing yourself justice, right? That goes away because you're going to start putting into the world what is actually you. So you're going to find a worksheet again in the show notes for this episode. It's going to have 10 journaling prompts to help you audit this layer fully. So you can download that from the link in the show notes. And I do want you to take your time and go through these. Even if you're someone listening who's saying, Jill, I am not a journaler, then use another word. I don't mind. Just use it as an assessment or an audit, like whatever language works for you. But just sit with the questions a little bit, please, because it will really help you get much clearer on what the core of your brand really is. If you want that competitive advantage, this is how you get it. Honestly, the day I really chose, and it was a conscious choice, to allow the full version of myself into my business was the day that everything changed for me. And that's not because it suddenly, like overnight, became like a million times easier. It didn't. But in fact, actually showing up as the whole version of yourself, sometimes that feels really hard to begin with. It's like taking a deep breath every day. But that doesn't last for long. I promise you it doesn't. You get in this habit, and as soon as you get in the habit of just effortlessly being yourself, when I hit record on this podcast, I'm just talking to you. I'm just me having a conversation with you, right? The sooner you can get into that, then creating content becomes so much easier. I have put out 4 years worth of podcast episodes now. You can't do that if you're not authentic, if you're not consistently just being yourself. I wouldn't be able to consistently put out an episode of this podcast every week. It would be so hard. So remember, your brand is the truest expression of who you are, and the world needs that expression, not your carefully curated version. So my vision, my wish for all of us is that we stop building brands that seem sensible. That's where we go wrong. Whenever we try and do something sensible, let's face it, it all goes wrong. Build the brand that's true for you. Okay, next week we're going to go into layer 3, which is offers, which I'm very, very excited about. Because once you know who you are, then downstream from that is your offers. And then you can start packaging your work in a way that really reflects that truth and serves the people you're here to serve at the highest possible level. Okay, right. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope you're enjoying this series. Okay, bye for now.